Hi, and welcome to Code Rage. This is Jacob Thurman from Embarcadero Technologies, and I'm here today to talk about AppAnalytics, our application usage analytics service. AppAnalytics is an application usage analytics product for desktop, mobile, and wearables. It lets you track and measure how often your apps are used, which features get used, and how often the application crashes, and things like that. You've probably all used software from large companies that invite you to join their user experience program, where they collect anonymous data about how you use the software in order to improve it in the future. AppAnalytics is a user experience program in a box. You just plug our component into your Delphi or C++ Builder application, and you can literally have your own user experience program in 2 minutes. Customers who use AppAnalytics are customers who understand the value of data and how information contributes to decision-making processes and to the bottom line. AppAnalytics can give you insights into user behavior, like which features are the most popular or what people do first when they open your application. AppAnalytics helps you improve the quality of your software by tracking unhandled exceptions, which can be an indication that your program is crashing. It can show you how frequently these exceptions occur, and it gives you information that helps to debug them. As an example, I talked with a customer recently who deployed internal software with AppAnalytics, and he quickly started seeing reports of unhandled exceptions that indicated there could be a bug in the software. On further investigation, as he talked to users and saw how they were using their software, he discovered that there was a bug that had been there for some time that no one had ever told him about, but users had devised a workaround that took time and was hurting their productivity. So using information provided by AppAnalytics, he was able to fix the bug and deploy a new, higher quality release in less than 24 hours. AppAnalytics helps you anticipate users' wants and needs. You can see how users are actually using your software, which is often different than how you think they should be using your software. And you can improve and redesign things and even add new features to reflect what the users are really trying to do, so you can help users achieve their goals. AppAnalytics can even help you reduce costs. For example, one thing you can see with AppAnalytics is which operating systems your app is being run on. Imagine you've deployed an iOS application that runs on iOS 7, and you see that 99% of your users are using iOS 8 or 9. You might consider ending support for iOS 7, which would reduce your costs and your support burden because you would no longer have to maintain compatibility and testing for iOS 7. On the other hand, you might discover that you have many users still using iOS 7 and that you should definitely continue supporting it. Otherwise, you could alienate and lose a significant user base. So we can't tell you whether you should support iOS 7, but we can tell you that without the information available through AppAnalytics, deciding which operating systems to support is pretty much just a guess. So in this presentation, I'm going to first show you briefly how AppAnalytics works from a developer point of view, and then discuss some best practices for using AppAnalytics to aid you and your team during each phase of the software development lifecycle. The key part of AppAnalytics is the AppAnalytics web application at appanalytics.embarcadero.com. Since you're watching Code Rage, it's probably safe to assume you already have an account on the Embarcadero Developer Network, or EDN. You'll use that same EDN account to log into AppAnalytics. Just enter your EDN email and your password and log in. Once you've logged in, you'll add an application to your account by clicking the Add Application button. You'll give your application a name and choose the development tool you'll be using. We're going to use Delphi. And then click Save. Once you've created your application, you'll see the application properties. There are some more advanced features down here, but what we're interested in is the application ID, which is this text right here. So we're going to copy everything, including the curly braces, because we're going to need it later in the IDE. So now that we have the application created in the web interface, we can add AppAnalytics to our application. So here, I've taken the standard classic VCL rich edit demo, and we're going to add AppAnalytics data collection to it. So adding basic data collection is really, really simple. We're just going to grab a TAppAnalytics component. We'll paste the application ID from the web application, and we set the component's active property to true. That's it. The next time we start the application, we're going to see a notice informing the user that we're collecting data. You can change this, how this looks, and control how this works, by the way, to customize how you inform the user that you're doing this anonymous data collection. You can add an opt-out button, things like that. We click OK, and now we can use the application as usual. I can type some text, I can click some buttons, I can change the font. I can use this application the way I normally would. In the background, the AppAnalytics component is monitoring what I'm doing, and it will occasionally send some anonymous event data back to the web application for analysis. So I'm going to close the rich edit application to complete my session. Now, it can take up to 15 minutes for data to appear in the application dashboard. We can skip that time through the magic of video editing. Now when I go to the Overview tab of AppAnalytics, I can see the information that was derived from my using the application. Here you can see I'm one user, and I started and used the application once. So you can see one user with one application start right here. Scrolling down, I can see that I used version 0.0.0.0 of the software, and that I used operating system version 6.2, which we know is Windows 10. The next thing I'm going to do is copy the executable for this application to a machine running Windows 7, and I'm going to run it there too. Now we see two users and two sessions, and the graphs here begin to change. As more and more users begin to use your software, we'll see how many users you have, how many times the application was started, which versions are being used, which operating systems are being used, etc. And this graph up here will show trends over time, showing the number of users and sessions each day for a chosen time frame. All this data comes from simply dropping the TAppAnalytics component into the application. If we want more details about what your application is doing, we can turn to custom events. To gather custom event data, we need to write a little bit of code, but not much. We'll use the track event method of the TAppAnalytics object. Track event takes from 1 to 4 parameters, which we'll call category, action, label, and value. We don't actually assign any particular meaning to the category, action, label, and value, other than that they're in a hierarchy. So you can analyze all of the actions in a particular category, all the labels within a particular action, and so on. And the value is a number instead of a string, so we can do numerical analytics like showing the sum or the average. For our example, let's say we want to explore how people use the feature of our rich text editor that lets them write text in bold. We want to see how often people turn on the bold button to make all of the text bold versus how often they select just a portion of the text and then make it bold. So we'll do this with a custom event. So in our application, we're going to find the code behind the bold button. That's the bold button click method. And we're going to insert some code here to record a custom event. We want to do it differently based on whether they've got text selected or not. So I need to turn this into a block. And then we want to behave differently based on whether text is selected or not. So we'll use an if statement. Say if editor.selectedLength is greater than 0. So this means there is currently a selection. Oops, looks like I missed a semicolon. There is currently a selection. So we're going to record the event using AppAnalytics 1.trackEvent. And for a category, we'll use text formatting. For the action, we're going to say bold. And then we'll use the label to differentiate whether there is selected text. So in this case, it's a string, we'll say selected text. And I don't really need a value associated with this, so I'm just going to leave that parameter out. If there is no selection, we'll do something similar. We'll use the track event method, and we'll still use text formatting as the category, bold as the action, but this time, since there's no text already selected, we're going to make the text, or the label, no selection. Now, if I run the application, and I type some text, I'm going to make it bold, maybe not bold, type some more text, make it bold, type some more. I'm going to make this not bold, but we're going to bold just a couple of individual words. And we'll do a little bit more of that. So each time I do this, each time I make some text bold, AppAnalytics is recording that custom event that we created. So now that I've done that a few times, I'm going to exit the application. And I'll go back to the web application. Next, here on the Custom Events tab, we can see right away there have been a few text formatting events. We can click on this to drill down and see that 5 of those events were bold text formatting. We can drill down even further and see that 2 of those events were bold formatting with no selection, but 3 were formatting with a selection. So we can see that we used the bold feature 5 times, 3 times with selected text, and 2 times without. So people always ask about limitations for this. There is no limit to the number of categories, actions, or labels that you can have when using custom events. We can ask more in-depth questions too, using the Advanced Analysis tab. For example, we could see which operating systems use which custom events, features, or other combinations of data. So for example, let's take a look at operating system versions, and we'll choose category, action, and label. And we want to see how many users occurred for each operating system version for each category, action, and label. So we can see here 1 user using Windows 10 or Windows 6.2 with no selection, and 1 user with the selection, which that 1 user was me. This is a really powerful way to drill down and find patterns and get great information out of your data. So that was a really brief demonstration about how AppAnalytics works and the kinds of things that you can do with it. Next, I'm going to share some best practices for using AppAnalytics during different phases of the life cycle of your applications. So the information that you collect with AppAnalytics can serve different purposes depending on where you are in the application development lifecycle. So we're going to talk about 3 different phases of the application development lifecycle. We'll talk about proof of concepts, we'll talk about beta testing, and then we'll talk about the actual deployment of your application to customers or to end users. So if you're just working on a proof of concept, the most important question is whether the application is actually solving the problem that it's supposed to solve. When your software is in this initial proof of concept stage, we recommend that you use just a few simple custom events to see whether users are able to achieve the goal of the software. You add just a little code to your proof of concept application to see whether the goal was achieved or whether the user exited the application without successfully accomplishing the goal of the software. So we suggest that when the application exits, you record that outcome as a custom event, and then you'll see in the web interface whether the software successfully fulfills its purpose or whether you need to go back to the drawing board and try out some new concepts in your proof of concept to make sure the application achieves its goals. At this stage, this proof of concept stage, there's a real temptation to start tracking every little detail, but I would caution against that. The only question worth asking at this point is whether you're building something useful, and you can determine that with just a few basic custom events in AppAnalytics. One thing you'll want to be careful about at this point is recording your own sessions, or rather not recording your own sessions. As a developer, you probably start your program hundreds or even thousands of times for each debugging session each time you try something new. So you want to make sure that you're not recording your own debugging sessions, or you'll end up skewing the data. So to make sure that you're not recording your data, you can either disable the AppAnalytics component for yourself by setting the active property to false, or better yet, writing an event handler for the onPrivacy message event that allows you to opt out of data collection. You can also set up an IP address filter in the web application and cause the web application to simply ignore events that come from your computer. You got to be careful with this if your IP address changes, though. Let's take a look at how you would do that. In the AppAnalytics web interface for my application, I'm going to click on the Properties tab. At the bottom of the page, there's an IP address filters, and I can add my own IP address here. So if I know my IP address is 207.211.86.4, and I click Add Filter, once that filter gets added, any events that are sent to the AppAnalytics servers from that IP address will not be recorded. They just are discarded without ever being recorded. So if I put my own IP address in there, I can use the application, including using AppAnalytics, and those events simply won't be recorded and won't be included in any of the analysis. And I can use that to make sure that my events as a developer are not recorded and don't skew the data, the useful data that I'm getting from end users. Moving on to the beta testing stage of the software development cycle, AppAnalytics becomes a very powerful testing tool. Just as you might use a static analysis tool to ensure good coverage in unit tests and integration tests, AppAnalytics is your coverage tool for beta testing. You can use AppAnalytics to ensure that your application is being tested and that the areas you want to focus on are actually being used. To this end, we suggest that for beta testing, you do not allow users to opt out, but require them to allow you to collect the data. While we generally believe that an opt-out option is appropriate, we think that for beta testers, there's a higher level of responsibility for users to report their experience back to you. So AppAnalytics automates an important and significant part of this process. Next, if you release multiple beta versions, we suggest that you create a new application ID for each one. So you start each new test with a clean slate, and you can analyze data for only that specific beta version. We also recommend that you add code to your beta versions to make them expire, so you're not collecting data for an old beta version, and so your beta testers are incentivized to test the most recent version of your software, which gives you more useful data. At this point, during the beta testing phase, we suggest that you go ahead and use custom events to track small details, like the use of individual features. You'll want to know that every feature, every form, every button in your application has been tested. You'll want to keep an eye out for things that aren't getting tested and ask your testers to concentrate more on those areas, or maybe you want to figure out why certain features aren't being tested, aren't being used by your beta testers. Another thing you'll want to watch for is the operating systems that are being used. You want to be confident in your claims of support for various platforms, and knowing that beta testers have successfully used the software on each platform that you support. This will help your confidence. You also want to make sure that AppAnalytics is set up to track unhandled exceptions, which are often indicative of software crashes. Patterns in unhandled exceptions or crashes can indicate things that you overlooked and help you find and fix bugs before you ever ship. Finally, again, just like with the proof of concept, you're going to want to ensure that your own developer debugging sessions aren't being recorded, as that would add a lot of unneeded events and skew your data. And again, you can do that with the IP address filter that we saw, or you can do that by disabling the AppAnalytics component, either by setting the active property to false or handling the onPrivacy message event and indicating in that event that that the user has opted out. As you move on to deployment, you're going to want to approach AppAnalytics a little bit differently again. First, you're going to want to make data collection optional and allow users to opt out. Beta testers should be fine with providing data to you, but end users may not be. So we strongly recommend that you implement the onPrivacy message event in the TAppAnalytics component and allow the user to choose to participate in your customer experience program. Next, as you prepare your application for deployment, you're going to want to reduce the granularity of your custom event tracking. Remember that the more events you need to collect, the more AppAnalytics costs. So a large amount of very fine tracking for a large user base may not justify the cost. Think of the questions that you want to answer and then tailor your custom events to those questions. You can always change your questions and your tracking for a point release later on. We do recommend that you continue collecting unhandled exception data, as this can give you advanced warning of errors that users are encountering and help you fix them before they become a big problem. And finally, once you deploy your application, you'll want to remember to come back to the AppAnalytics web application frequently to see your data, to analyze trends, and decide how to improve the design and quality of your software for your users. For more information about Embarcadero AppAnalytics, to sign up for a free trial account, please visit embarcadero.com/products/AppAnalytics. We'll put that right here. I think we have some time now for a little bit of question and answer.
No, it's great. It's great to talk with you, Jacob. You've been a partner for a long time, and it's great to be working with this technology and have the luxury of presenting it to people. I'm curious about a few things, and this maybe will juice other people to ask questions. On track event, the names that you chose for the parameters, category, action, label, value, is there some historic or specific purpose for what the parameters were called?
The same terms that are used for the same thing in Google Analytics. If you're familiar with Google Analytics for website analytics, website usage tracking, it's the exact same terms that were used there. So that's what that particular idea was modeled after.
Okay, and what would be example uses of the last parameter that's optional parameter that's a double called value?
Sure. For example, if you wanted to track how long a particular action takes, for example, I don't know if we were looking at the RAD Studio IDE, we were tracking data in there. We wanted to know the average compile time for a C++ application. We might put the compile time in seconds into that value, and then we can analyze the average compile time for a project, for example.
Okay, I thought maybe it was how much money somebody owed me. No, just kidding. I was kidding. I'm really kidding. We do provide a sample.
If you're creating an application that takes money, I mean, if you were writing iTunes in C++ Builder, you could certainly track something like that.
Yeah, and then we do provide sample privacy message text. So, but everybody can just change that. It's just I think it's a memo or a string list that you can customize for your own purposes when you deploy your apps.
Yeah, so you can set the specific text, and we'll just use the single button message box, or there's an onPrivacy message event, and you could actually implement your own dialog box that would show your privacy message, and there you could give the user an opportunity to opt out or ask for more data and do whatever you want with it there.
I just wanted to mention, everybody, when you go to the AppAnalytics.embarcadero.com to the portal, you use your EDN account sign in, so your email address and password, and so if you forget your password, you can click on forget your password, and member services will send, will do some things to help you log in. But you can, that's the login is use your EDN account. If you don't have an EDN account, go to members.embarcadero.com and create an account. Usually you've already got one because you've registered one of our products, and that part of signing up generates an EDN account in our product licensing system. So that's there. And then under the covers, I know you and I have talked about this before, and it has a relationship to iOS 9, for example, with its with a new feature they have for security that I blogged about. Under the covers, we were originally using, and maybe still using, HTTP, right?
Correct.
But eventually we'll take care of that. But we always guide people to not collect sensitive information as part of your analytics. Is that another? We don't know what you're collecting when you do track event and put parameters in there and so on, right?
Right, and we don't need to bring the lawyer into this, but if we're tracking sensitive data or personally identifiable data, then it is against the end user license agreement that you agree to when you sign up for AppAnalytics. So just don't do that. And I mean, let's be fair. Your customers are trusting you to be good stewards of the data, and you just want to make sure that data is anonymous. So no asking the user to put their credit card number in and then sending it in with track event or something like that. I think it's pretty much common sense how to keep this stuff anonymous.
Yeah, and then there's so there's the iOS 9 thing. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat window here and on my blog post, where you have to do some info plist additions to use AppAnalytics for an iOS app deployment because of it's Apple's app transport security features, what they call it. So I'll paste that in. Same. The web browser component uses HTTP, or if you're using ND sockets and so on, it's HTTP. So there's some info plist keys that you need to put in, and I'm bringing that URL up. I'm going to paste it in the chat window. You can tell you how to put the XML into your apps. I think if I remember correctly, you were on VCL, right? You're using some Windows APIs to be able to hook the start, stop, which window gets executed and so on. Was it some kind of assisted instruction API or whatever Microsoft was providing, or is it different these days?
It uses the Windows Hooks API. It's been around since Windows 3.1, actually. Yeah, just so you can get I think it's a CBT hook, computer-based training, which is useful for a lot of other things too. So it lets a message get sent when a window is activated or focused, and then we can get which VCL object that was from the window handle, and that's how we can track which form is activated or which control was focused.
And then when you do the sort of custom filtering, can you do that on the version number of your software? Is that one of the options? I just can't remember. I'm going to log in and remind myself.
You can in the advanced analysis, but if you're looking at like the flow tab or the custom events tab, then that's just going to be all of the aggregated data over the time period that you've selected.
Okay, and then I in the video I did, it was in the What's New in FireMonkey, so people can check that out on the replay if you missed the What's New in FireMonkey. I was with Darren Kozinski, who did the implementation for the FireMonkey hooking into the analytics. For FireMonkey, it needed to do things not just Windows only, but OS 10, iOS, Android, and so on. And I did some demos, and in there you'll see the XML and iOS, and now in 10 Seattle we have track record. Sorry. Why do I say that all the time? I don't know why I say track record. Track event was always in the VCL version, right, Jacob?
Yes.
And now in 10 Seattle, there's a track event method for analytics, and there's some blog posts and documentation about the previous way that you could hook into custom events. That still works in FireMonkey, I believe, as well. And then, so yeah, in my sample I have Android 5 showing up as a platform, Windows 10 showing up as a platform, iOS 9 showing up as a platform. That was really cool. Explain to people, and maybe to me too, that whole flow between forms, for example, how that might be used. Are you trying to make sure that people are not abandoning a multi-part form, or that how they're transitioning from one part of the app to the other? Is there some guidance or ideas there using that part of the analysis?
Yep, so that's what we call an alluvial flow diagram, and it shows the flow in terms of quantity. So for example, if you have an application with lots of forms in it, you may discover that users always go from one form to another. I'm trying to think of a good example, but users may always go from form 1 to form 2. And that's the only time that they ever go to form 2, or a very rare time, but that 98% of users open the app and immediately go to form 1, assuming form 1 is not your main form. So what that would indicate to me is that maybe we should consider taking whatever's on form 1 and putting it on the main form, or making that the first thing that appears when the app opens. Because if that's what users are always doing to make the app more user-friendly, we would consider making that feature more accessible quicker. So that's what the intent of the flow is for, is to see which forms are getting used in what order, and how users in aggregate are flowing from one form to another, so that we can streamline that flow and help the users be more productive and more successful in achieving the goal of the application.
And in the analytics, when I do a app start, app shutdown, do you do a calculation of runtime, or is it just I do that analysis in like a spreadsheet or somewhere?
We don't have a view that shows that analysis, but that's something that we would probably consider for the future. Wink, wink.
There you go. But I know you can export the data to a CSV file and bring it into a spreadsheet, or put it into a data set database or whatever you want, and do additional analysis. So is that only on the advanced tab, or is that on each view?
You would ask me something I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't either.
I think you can get that on more than just the advanced tab, but I would have to look to be sure.
Have stumped the developer. Okay.
Logging in here.
Yeah, me too. And I should mention while Jacob's doing that the free edition gives you, I think it's one app and 10,000, maybe it's changed, reports on 10,000 events, but will save more events. And as you move up the levels in AppAnalytics, you're able to report on more. So you can still generate the events. You just can only see each month the number at the level that you're at. So
both the custom events tab and the advanced analysis tab, you can download the data as a CSV, so you can pull it into Excel or import it into a SQL database or something. And if there's analysis that we're not providing, you can still get that from that data.
Yeah, and then I won't mention the developer or the customer, but the unhandled exceptions, or there was a case where I think the users of their app, when they would get exceptions, they were told by someone, just restart the app, not report it, just restart it. And so having this kind of analytics that can help you not only find problems in the software, but find behaviors of the users that are not good behaviors, because they should be reporting problems in the software rather than working around them. think was
yeah, if you're thinking of the same case that I mentioned in the demo there, in this case it was software that was being used by employees in a retail environment. So every time they would have to shut down the app and restart it, number one, took time that they should have been spending. It would have been better for the employees to be spending with the customers, and it just doesn't look good when the software that you're using to run your retail storefront is crashing. So we were very excited when that customer told us about that, that he was able to solve that, and the quick turnaround time, how quickly he realized that there was a problem, how quickly he was able to figure out what the problem was just based on what he saw from AppAnalytics, and then how quickly he was able to fix it and get a new version out to the users. That was fantastic.
And some developers worry about the impact on the executing of their application, but really there's not much under the covers other than caching, but then sending off. Is it done in a separate thread, or is it in the main thread periodically? When does the sending happen along the way?
It's done in a separate thread, except when the application exits. When the application exits, it sends one last batch in the main thread just to make sure that it gets sent off before the application finally terminates. But other than during the application exit, it's all done in a separate thread, so the performance impact is minimal to non-existent.
Yeah, and again, it's not doing much. It's packaging up those parameters and sending it off. I think the other thing is you can control that in the sense that you can turn on and off analytics at any time, just enable, disable the component. The other thing is if you see a pattern, for example, maybe you have an app that does data concentration at midnight, from midnight to 1 in the morning. You could, have an event that would fire during that period of time that would turn analytics on. Or if you saw some time of day pattern, you could choose the time of day to have analytics turned on and off. You didn't have to leave them on all the time, right, Jacob?
Yeah, that's correct. You just set the active property of the analytics component and control whether it's being tracked through that. There are also, we didn't talk about it in the demo, but there are properties of the component for the size of the cache and the frequency of sending data. So by default, or by design, it will send the data off to the server not when every event occurs, but either when the cache fills up or at a specific time interval. And I'm going to be wrong about this, and someone's going to call me out on it, but it's like 1,000 events in the cache or every 10 minutes, something like that. And those are both user configurable parameters, so you can make it a larger cache or more or less frequent time interval.
And the other thing, and maybe you mentioned this on the reporting side, as far as the reports are going in, but as far as seeing the visualization of those reports, do I remember correctly that there's those visualizations are sort of updated periodically? I don't know if it was on every 15 minutes, top of the hour, quarter of the hour, or whatever.
Yeah, every 15 minutes. Just because we have to do there's a whole lot of behind-the-scenes statistical analysis and calculations and roll-ups and things that happen to the data in order to make the web interface appear snappy. If you've got 10 million events, you can't iterate all of them on every request. So every 15 minutes we do a big roll-up on the data. So it can take up to 15 minutes for that data to appear after the event actually occurs. I didn't say that right, after the event actually gets sent to the server.
And one other thing on the flow, user flow, you have user flow for forms, but you also have, I think, because you can hook when a control gets focused, is that right? Or are those combined together?
No, those are two separate views, two separate ideas. So, and the user flow for controls, so every time a control in your application gets focused, it would send it an event. That tends to put a lot of data in the system. It should probably only be used, like we talked about, in a beta testing type of scenario or testing a specific feature for just a few customers. But it can be really useful to see that customers always go from one specific control to another.
And when you're looking at your results, you can also filter by date range, either custom or there's some pre-built last 7 days, this month, and so on, just to make it easier for people to do selections. So you have that option in the portal as well. I have this, and maybe this is not anything, but when you have the application ID, which is a GUID, right, that you put in when you create an application in the portal, and you use that in your applications, is there a guidance or best practice, or do we care if that GUID is pasted into a property in the form and now it's in the form file and now it's inside the executable versus being loaded externally somehow when the app is loaded? From a security standpoint, can somebody hijack that GUID and do something with it?
That is a good question. I think the best practice is just to put it into, put it into the property in the form designer. So go ahead and put it in there. That GUID gets sent. So I guess the answer to your question is yes, it's absolutely possible for somebody to send data to the server under the guise of being your application, but that's exactly what you want to happen, is that you want your users to be sending that data. So yes, I guess there is a potential for abuse there. I don't know what good that abuse would do to a potential abuser other than to do it just because. But it is certainly technically possible, and as far as I'm aware, there is no way to mitigate that because we're just talking about data getting sent to a server.
I guess you could see the IP address and filter it out somehow. Say, I don't care about that stuff. But I'm sorry I even brought it up, but that's the way I am sometimes. The guest users, which is on the properties page where you can, depending on your plan, you can invite a user. That's for them to go log in and look at the analytics like another member of your team or something. Is that what that's for?
Yeah. For example, I know of a customer who retained the services of a software marketing consulting firm and gave them access to see the AppAnalytics data. So it gives them guest access so they can see the data, but they can't change the properties. They can't change anything. It's a read-only view into the data.
Okay, and the other thing I should mention
for a consultant, outside consultant, or just another employee, another coworker, so that more than just the one person who has the account can look at the data.
And then from a selling standpoint on our side,
sorry, go ahead.
There's just a note that when you start with the free service and then you contact our sales department, and if you upgrade your plan, in the portal, there's a link off the top of the portal page, upgrade service plan, where you can put in the serial number and put your password and your username or email, and then that's how you update your plan, and you just use the same portal. It doesn't change the application IDs or anything else, right, Jacob?
Correct.
And so as you update your plan, all of a sudden you're seeing reports on more analytics that have been collected. You'll see the more of them, and also then, depending on your plan, more applications and so on. Yeah.
Right.
On the portal, I mean, we have information about AppAnalytics component in the doc wiki and all of that. We have videos on the Embarcadero YouTube channel, but also in the AppAnalytics portal, there's some links to the doc wiki that are on that home Welcome to AppAnalytics page, which points you to using AppAnalytics in your VCL and FireMonkey apps, and there's a link to pricing information and how to upgrade your account and getting started and all of that. So, but the thing again to tell everybody is, if you have XE8, and now if you have RAD Studio or Delphi or C++ Builder 10 Seattle, the component is there. You can get a free account to start, so the component's already there. You can even put the component in your existing apps, or maybe you're starting a new project, have it disabled until you create your account, and then you've already designed and put this thing in, again following the best practices from Jacob. But the component's there. It's very small. It uses just the runtime library, so it's safe to put that component in and leave it off, and unless you know something else, Jacob, that I don't know.
Nope, that's all completely correct.
Just real simple, non-visual control, drop it in, and set the options, handle some of the events, and do your custom track event things. And it's very simple, easy to get started. One non-visual component and a few projects, property settings. So I can't think of something easier to give so much benefit as you do the analysis. And there's my sales pitch. Sorry, I'm a cheerleader for programming.
It's true though. I mean, this is we make so many big decisions about what to do with your application. How should we change the user interface? What features should we keep? What features maybe should we kill because users don't use them? And until recently, you just had to guess. You might be able to talk to a small handful of users, but there was no way to get real objective data to find that out. And now there is, and that's information-driven decision making is a great thing for programmers, for project managers, and anybody who's in the business of software.
Yeah, and if you're inside of a company for your users, it's still useful, although they can probably track you down inside your own company. And where's that programmer? I got to talk to him about something. But in this mobile space and customers, when you're delivering software around the world, you really and they're grabbing it from from a download site or, well, heaven forbid, or in the case of App Store, then a little bit, but you can do more. And on Android, again, they get side-loaded or whatever. So being able to, with the permission of the users and their knowledge, gather some information. You could even provide an interface in your application to let the users, in certain cases, maybe decide what they're going to send to you, or you might even guide them, And so everything you saw Jacob setting at design time in all of those properties, we all know in C++ Builder and Delphi that we can set those property values in code and business logic as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, okay, Jacob, it was great to hear your voice, and thank you for being part of Code Rage this year. And I know there's all sorts of cool things that we can think about adding for AppAnalytics. So I want to make sure that all of you, if you have, try AppAnalytics if you haven't tried it yet, and then tell us what more you would like as capabilities in AppAnalytics so that we can take a look at it and see what we might do in the future. And I know Jacob has his wink ideas, so there you go. I have my favorite list too, and Jacob knows what one of them is at least, maybe more. So thank you very much, Jacob.
All right, thanks for having me. Have a good day.